My name is Josh Ormond. I am the owner and sole member of IOZAX LLC. That is an I, not an L at the beginning. If you ever want to know about the name, you're free to ask. It's a really short story. I also am the senior developer with a team at City Tech Solutions. We're all contractors that we do work for them. They do like building permits and things for cities. Pretty fun. Way less boring than it sounds like. All right, so what does the word expressive mean? I want to point out before we go any further that I am not an expert in writing expressive code. But if we were to ask Thomas Edison if he were to write code, he would probably say, I am not a master of writing expressive code, but I've seen 1,000 ways not to do it. So expressive, just thinking about the definition. This is about effectively conveying thought or feeling, right? So we see a lot of different ways that we do it as humans. Our facial expressions, the way our vocal modulation, the tone of our voice, text communication, thinking about using all caps, like it has a meaning, right? That's how we express ourselves sometimes. And even proximity of how you talk to somebody, the close talker that you have at the office. So example in human language, this is a really basic one. That top one, if you have an older grandparent, you've probably heard this one. My sufficiency has been sophisticated, to have any more would be superfluous. That's the least expressive way to say that. You're full. Just a quick introduction to imperative versus declarative, because this is where expressivity of a coding language and how you write things. If you ever go look for it, you'll see a lot of this imperative versus declarative, and this is the only reason I mention it. So imperative programming is you tell the program how to do it. Like you give it step-by-step instructions. Now you recognize right away FileMaker is very imperative. We tell it to do everything for the most part. Declarative is more about you tell the program what you want back, but you don't care how it does it. You just want the outcome. So that's imperative versus declarative. Now we're going to drift a little bit into declarative because we're going to encapsulate some functionality into something that's easier to use, and writing less code really is part of it. But the concept really comes down to, I want to make this easier to use, easier to read, because you're going to spend way more time reading code than you are writing code. So I've become a little bit obsessed with this topic. It is the fault of Josh Halpern, so if you see him around, he is here. It's his fault. Okay. So definition of expressivity of a programming language. So here's the problem with the word. There's no formal definition. There's a lot of opinions about it. There's a lot of fighting about what it means. But in the end, it means we can make up what we want, and I can say whatever I want. You can't tell me I'm wrong, so here we go. This is the definition I found most useful. Expressivity of a programming language is the capability of a programming language to express a solution of a problem in the closest way to the original problem, in a clear, natural, intuitive, and concise way, and in terms of other already solved problems. Now we're going to talk about the first two and not the last one. The last one gets a lot deeper and is way more complex, and we just don't have time for that in an hour or so. Okay, so these are the two things we're going to focus on, those first two. Does your solution, or how you write your code, is it close to the problem you're solving? And we'll give a few examples of that. And is it clear, intuitive, and concise? Is it short enough? When I read your code, do I know what it's doing without having to go dig into every custom function that you're using, or go into every subscript that you're running just so I can see what it's doing, because I don't know. It's an art, not a science. Okay, so now most of us are probably familiar with a calculation like this. How many of you have used getFieldName? Very good. It's super helpful because it gives you the field name back in text. So the result is the way too light text in the bottom there that you can barely read. That would be the result of getFieldName. It just returns it in text so you can do things with it. This is very helpful for like if you're trying to check, just make sure that the user is on the right context before you go setting fields. Like, are you on the right layout? Just want to make sure we're there. How many of you have a function like this or something similar where you are just extracting the field name or the table name from that function? So this would be a custom function. Probably all have one. Many of us have one. It makes it easy because you don't have to think about how to write that. It's not real hard to write the function, but it is a lot more text. You can get really fancy with this, and you see the 1 at the bottom, and you can actually have it come back quoted, which is really helpful if you're doing like a SQL call. Okay, so we think about this problem, right? I need the field name. I need it to be easy. I want to be able to just say, hey, I'm getting the field name. Like if I see this function, you immediately know what it's doing. It's getting the field name. It's very close to the problem we're solving, which is I don't want to write out the entire calculation to get the field name. Now, how many of you have a function like this that you're using specifically for SQL? Yeah. How many of you have both? I have both. It's probably completely unnecessary, but I do. So what does this look like when you're in code? So you look at the bottom there, you see, or you call this function, and you get back the first name, and it's in quotes. And perfectly, it's good to use that for SQL. So when you see this in a script, it might look something like this. This is just a super basic example. You're getting the table name and you're getting the field name, and maybe you need to change what the table name is, and then you put it together to do a set field by name. I am not encouraging the use of set field by name. This is just the easy example that fits on the slide. So now, what if you're just getting the field name, but you use your SQL custom functions, right? Like, you. See, we've made the poor woman sick. Like, don't do that to people. The problem with this is not that it doesn't work, because we know that it works, because expressivity isn't about just function. It's about how easy it is to read and how easy it is to use. So when you see this, it may be obvious. You can read it and be like, okay, we're getting the table name, we're getting the field name. But that SQL thing in there just might throw you off and slow you down a little bit. Again, super simple, basic example of what we're talking about. This is too far away from the problem space that we're trying to solve. Maybe the idea here is just to get rid of the namespacing SQL before it, or the FM, and just use table name, field name, or get table name, get field name, things like that. Well, get field name you can't use, but. So here's another example of a connection between the problem and the solution that you end up using. Now, you look at this code. This is a very basic loop. We're just going to get the list of customer names or the contact names, and just going to loop through them and pull out a value. Now, you can see there I use the local variable i.value. I use that just for a specific reason for this example. You probably would never actually write that. But you look at this. This is pretty basic. This is pretty easy. But it's not really an expressive way to write this. This wouldn't really be a problem. Again, this is a basic example. As you get into more complex things, this becomes more important. How many of you have seen a calculation like this in a loop? Okay. How many of you use a calculation like this? Yeah, because it's a pain in the butt to write, isn't it? So if you're going to use it, use a text expander. Like I use text expanders all the time. And you could do this constantly. Now this, if you look at this calculation, you see this in every programming language, something like this. Because it's doing multiple things for us, right? It's setting the iterator. It's going to exit once it gets to the bottom of the list and clear itself. That's an important one. So that's helpful, right? So it does all those things in one step. And sometimes we get obsessed with fewer lines of code. But this is a pain in the butt to write. Here's the other thing. What happens if you mess that calculation up? Like, it's not necessarily easy to see, is it? Like, you have to read it every time you look at it. I don't like that. I'm allergic to that. All right, so if you were to see this in scripts, this is the exact same script using this idea. It's one script step fewer. But again, you have to read that calculation to make sure, like as an example, if your junior developer was using it, did he write it correctly? Did I write it correctly? Because I may not have. But could we make this more expressive? Something that's close to the solution, but easy to use and easy to see. And it's probably a function you've seen before, for each. This for each custom function does exactly the same thing, except I can never mess it up. I just give it the list, and I give it what I want the iterator to be called, and it does all of those things for me. So there's a few things. It handles the iterator and clears it when it's done. It exits the loop because it'll be in an exit loop if. And one other benefit of this custom function is that it also sets a value of the thing it's getting. So it's doing a get value to pick out the item from the list. So I don't even have to set that separately now. And this is 2 steps shorter than the other one. And honestly, it's a little easier to read, isn't it? Now you may have to the first time go look to see what for each is doing. But once you know that, you'll never have to look again. And you know exactly what this is doing. You know what variable it's using. And you know that this i.value variable is available to use for you. And you can never screw it up. Because you don't have to, because it's all done for you. And that's a beneficial thing. The other thing that you run into is if something happens and you just happen to run into a variable that kind of collides with what your custom function is using, you can just go change it in your custom function, and it's fixed everywhere. And that's the benefit. The other thing is this auto-completes. Like, do I need to say more? Like, isn't that a winner? Now, the next part of being expressive is about it being clear and natural. So this natural and intuitive is an interesting concept, right? Like when you read code, do you immediately know what it's doing? That's the benefit of something being expressive. Now you can go too far with it, but this expressivity is really what helps you read code faster and spot bugs faster. So what are some areas that we can be more expressive? Well, we have the list there. Error trapping is a big one because it's so easy to mess that up. And some other areas like triggers and things like that. If you're using a variable to enable and disable triggers and have scripts not run. Again, another area that you could end up messing up the variable and things not working the way you expect. And we'll actually show an example of that in a second. There is such a thing as too concise. Please, please, do not use single letter variables except for iterators. Like if it's in a loop for an iterator, that is expected in every programming language. That one's acceptable, but do not do like A, B, C, D, E, F, then write a calculation and expect anybody to know what it does. You will have trouble reading it next week and in 6 months. And a year from now, you're gonna be questioning who wrote this function and want to fire somebody just to find out it was you that wrote it. So there's a line there, so be careful with that. So the idea is when you look back at a function, have somebody else read your code. Do they know what it is? If they don't, maybe you just need to change the name that you're using. Or maybe you've encapsulated too much function in what you're doing, and it kind of becomes too much magic. All right, so here's an example of why being expressive and clear and natural and intuitive could be important. So one time I was working for a company named Apartment Finder. I was close friends with the boss. And he asked me to do something challenging in Excel. Okay? So this was pre-FileMaker. I'm going to put that out there. But he kept asking for something. It was harder and harder. And it just like this thing got really complicated. Like it's an Excel spreadsheet, not a database. And it got really hard. It was fun to work on, to be honest, but it was complicated. So Travis's complicated project is what I named the file when I sent it to him. So which of those faces do you think was his reaction? Now here's the interesting thing, right? You can infer a lot from what I wrote. Like you think that I'm bitter about doing this project. But here are some truths. One, we have never talked about the name of that file. Not one time. Travis and I are still friends. We see each other weekly. I really did have fun working on the task. I wish it wasn't in Excel, but it was fun. It was a problem that needed to be solved, and we're all problem solvers. And later that year, he nominated me for an award in which he mentions the name of this file that I sent him. So how did he feel about it? He was slightly amused, as he is with most things I do. Next, I was getting ready for this presentation, and I was cleaning out some files in an old Dropbox folder for the company I haven't worked for close to 20 years now, I guess. And I found this file. What do you think that is? Any ideas? Yeah, it's weird, right? Like, is it a murder mystery? Is it a pitch for a new game show? Like, something else altogether? Like, I didn't know. So I had to open the file. And DR were the initials for the person that the file went to. Her name was Denise. Last name ended with an R. Finder was for Apartment Finder. It was one of several publications that we were handling at the company that we worked at. And BOB, do you know what that is? What about Bob? What is it? It's Book of Business. So this was just a report on her book of business that I would send them every week. So why does naming matter? Because that file would have sat there for years and I would have no idea what that was. Okay, so why do names matter? Any of you have a custom function like this? You should. If you don't, do it. Because you get into those situations with hide object when, we'll show this in just a second, where you're doing the opposite of the thing that you would normally want to do. Like, I want Robert and Josh to see this, but I don't want anybody else to see it. And you write the calculation, but the calculation is a hide object when, which means you need to do the opposite of the thing you think you want to do. And that gets really brain bendy in some situations. Okay, so here's an example. We have an object on the layout. I want just Josh and Robert to see this thing. Which of those calculations works? I don't want anybody other than Josh and Bob to see it. Great, great. You might know the answer to this. I actually don't, because I just wrote the calculations. I have never tested them. I have an idea which ones work. Which one of those works? Because this is what we know. The opposite of and or gets really confusing sometimes when you're in a rush to try to fix something. This is why naming and expressivity matters. Because this can be really hard, and you could spend way too many cycles just spinning your wheels on something like this. So a show object one calculation, you just put in what you want to show, which is typically an easier calculation. And then you have your answer. Now those two calculations work, and then you have the one at the bottom, show object when. Which of those is easiest to read? Do you know what it's doing when you read it? That's really the question. And if it saves you just a few seconds, 100 times a day, it'll be a better day for you. It's a winner. What about time? Like, you can write the least expressive code. Like, say you want to round time to like the nearest 15 minutes for whatever reason. Maybe you're doing billing to a client or something like that. That top one works really well. You could have a text expander that writes this out for you. But what if you want to change it? Now what? Like, the top one is rounding things to a minute. So it's basically just dropping off the seconds. You look at that second one, the round time function. It's a little bit more expressive. Like, you just feed it the time and the kind of the format of the what time you want it to round up to or down to. And then the last one, it tells it to round up or not. And then the bottom one kind of is on the line. Is this a little too expressive? Like, I have to go look at the custom function to see what it's rounding to. Is that helpful or not? You got to figure that out. I have an opinion on it, and I will judge you for what you do. But I also recognize everybody has different situations. So if this works for you, and like if it's a global thing that you have to do for your company, then put it all together in round now, and you're done. Like, you don't ever have to think about it again. Again, clear and natural, intuitive, and make it short enough. Don't abbreviate too much. Write things out so that you can actually read it. But natural, that's the key one. Is it natural to the audience that's reading your code? If you have a few junior developers on your team and it's not natural to them, you need to simplify a little or use words that they are familiar with. Yeah. Raise your hand if you know what every one of those numbers mean. And if you know what every one of those numbers mean, you're a liar because 2 of them are fake. All right. Now this gets really hard, right? Like, sometimes it's really easy. You're like, oh, just, get window mode's not 0. I know what 0 is. Do you know what 0 is? Is that a question or an answer? Okay. There's a little too much question in there. But that's the problem, right? This is not expressive at all, unless you remember those numbers. And Again, go back to this idea. What if a junior developer is reading your code and there's a problem, something is showing in find mode when it's not supposed to be? They might look over this calculation and just assume it's right because they never looked up to see what that number meant. And add to that, it's probably in a hide object when, which means it's the opposite thing, right? So that's basically not get window mode equals 0. And when does that show? I don't know. So 3 simple custom functions. This is expressive and super simple. When you see this in code, you know exactly what it's doing. Am I in browse mode? Am I not in browse mode? That's it. That's all there is. Do I need to explain this one anymore? Like this is the simplest form of expression that we can get in code because we encapsulated the complicated stuff and just translated it into something that we can read easily and use easily. I've had to fight too hard to get these into some people's files, like on certain development teams. But it's also one of the things that has the most magic. I don't know why, but when a developer realizes this is so easy, they just start using it and they'll never say anything to you again because they're embarrassed that they argued with you. So those are some of the calculations that we'll see sometimes, right? And again, there's a difference between whether they're in a if script step or a hide object when. They're the opposite. Another reason we want to be concise and clear and natural, again, understanding what these, like you could write these out and just test. You say, hey, I have this global variable that I'm using, and here's what they are. Do you know why, from looking at this list, why I created the custom functions? There were more versions of this in our one file. These are all actual variables that were in the file. Now, funny enough, there was one of them that was, it was using the acrylic A and not a normal A. So it looks correct, but it wouldn't work. And it took me forever to figure out why. Like I had to delete the script step and rewrite it myself. Then it started working. And it took me a while to figure out why it didn't work. I went back into the DDR and found it wasn't in A. So that was why it didn't work. I spent way too many non-billable hours on that. So this becomes really easy, right? We're just turning it on, we're turning it off. And again, if we ever have a collision with the function or the variable name, we just change it in the custom function. And because it's temporary, it's changed everywhere. It's fixed. It doesn't matter if you use this in 10,000 places in your file, it's now fixed everywhere. And the thing that I love the most is it auto-completes. And that's why I use it. Is it necessary to have both is enabled and is disabled? Maybe, maybe not. You can decide that for yourself. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I will judge you, though. Okay, so we see this in a script, and this is it, right? The variable itself doesn't matter what you name it. This is just how I do it. The benefit of this is that variable sits at the top, and I actually have this custom function returning an error if something happens. It actually even tells me if the variable I set is JSON or not. So when I'm debugging, I know whether or not this thing was JSON or not. And if there was an error trying to set it. Like if I got an error back from the JSON for some reason, I can see the error and know what it is. Say that's why it's not working. Again, super fast to debug. I'm not even reading too much. Like I don't have to spend time looking at that triggers.enable because I know it works. I don't have to worry about it ever. And again, autocomplete makes it faster. It's faster to read. Junior developer can use this without even thinking about it. It's all good stuff. My coworker, when I made these functions at the time, I had to explain to him why I made them. He thought I was crazy. Now, in all fairness, I was in a very long, deep, and disturbing obsession around custom functions, and I was making way too many. But once he started using them, that was it. Like, but then we started making more of them, and we have several of them that some of them I don't show here because they're a little too disturbing for public view. But again, this is one of those things where you never again have to worry about a mistyped variable name. It ends, like, they have those mystery problems that you can't figure out why they happen, and it just turns out to be a misspelled variable somewhere. Like, how many hours do you spend just spinning your wheels on garbage like that? Again, this solves that problem. Here's another one. Like, say I want to debug something. This is especially important if you have a series of scripts that are calling each other that send emails out. How many of you have accidentally sent emails to your clients that you were testing? Right? This allows you, you guys didn't see that, but several of you either shifted in your seat or just went, that's okay. I've done it too. And it's, again, this is why we made these custom functions. And again, I don't have to worry about the variables being wrong or getting messed and then accidentally sending an email to 10,000 customers, with some funny joke that they were never supposed to see. So again, super easy. You just turn it on and off. And again, this is one of those things too where you can manipulate the incoming script parameter. So if you want to test different scenarios, you just put this at the top of your script and you set the script parameter yourself and then you can test whatever you want. Makes it super easy. All right. Has any of this scared you yet? Good. I was hoping it was more controversial, but I guess not. The next one might be a little bit off the rails. One of the things in expressive programming and in programming in general is that a lot of developers don't like magic. Like they don't like variables just appearing out of thin air when they don't expect them to. So if that bothers you, you should close your eyes. So the next one's a little bit weird. I don't actually use the script parameter.get as much anymore. But I was running into a problem when we were writing scripts where the script was using get script parameter throughout the whole script, which, to be fair, is probably the most performant way to use the script parameter. It's in a memory space. It has its own address. FileMaker knows exactly where it is. It's really fast to get that information. So setting it to a variable is a little bit redundant and kind of does slow things down a little bit. But it's also easier to debug that way. And let's say, for example, you need to test something later on in the script. If it's using get script parameter, you have to send in a script parameter in order to test it. But if you set it to a variable, you can just change the variable to whatever you want to test what you need. And again, if you have to fix something, you have to go all the way down the list and find all of them to fix them in this one script. And I remember I was debugging a script that was 6,000 lines long that was using get script parameter, and I got so frustrated because there was also a problem with variables all the way down through the script of them being misspelled. So that was frustrating, and future me did not like past me that day. So, but then we have these other functions, right? So you can extract the keys out of it if it's JSON. You can just extract individual values and set them to variables so that when you're debugging, you can see the actual value of those variables. Script parameter.data is just the entire script parameter, wherever the variable is set. This whole idea of known variables can be really, really powerful when you use them this way, when it's expressive. This becomes really important, like if you're passing a lot of data around and you just need to send the entire script parameter over, there it is. Again, it comes down to no more mistyped variables. It auto-completes. Did I say it auto-completes? Because I really love that it auto-completes. It's my favorite thing. Like literally, I can type SPG and enter. And it enters the function. And that's it. That's all there is to it. It's simple. It does a little bit of magic, and some people don't like that, and that's okay. I judge them also. Again, my coworker also thought I was nuts when I came up with this idea, and he's like, I don't understand at all. So I'm like, just try it for 2 weeks. And he never said another word about it. Until like months later, he's like, this is probably the best contribution you've ever given to the company, which I was proud of and a little sad. The other thing that it solves, and this is important, is that last line. How many times have you gone to get something out of a JSON variable just to find that there's nothing there, and then you get this error, but you get a false positive and the code continues anyways? Like, that's terrible. Like, I hate those. It's like everything, like the code looks right, but the data's wrong. But again, this comes down to you can have the custom function handle that for you, and instead of returning this error, it can either return nothing or false or whatever it is you need to protect the rest of your code and your data. Again, this is where like my mind really started to get made up. Like, I'm going to push this. I don't care what anybody thinks because it's just so helpful. Again, I don't use the actual get version of this anymore, But the other functions can be set to use the script parameter or however you're handling that. So whatever you do here, I will not judge you if you're using this. So we're going to end a little bit early because I want to make sure if you guys have things you want to talk about, questions you want to ask, that we have time to talk about them, because sometimes we get to the end of this and people think I'm crazy. So also, when you're done here, please go into the Engage to Go app, find the session, tap more, put feedback in there. Let them know what you think of the session. Either you get more of this or you get less of this based on your feedback. So if you want less of this, make sure you let them know. If you want more of it, let them know. And we'll see more of this type of content, because I think it's really basic. But at the same time, some of the basic things really is what affects our day-to-day development the most. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, because I think it's just so powerful. All right, so any questions?
Are you able to show any of those custom functions?
Right now, no.
Yeah, okay.
And the reason, all right, so in past versions of this, I've promised to give a demo file, which I have a thing called LOB. It's latent obsessive behavior. And I'll just tinker with it forever. So that's the reason why there's not a demo file right now. Those custom functions also incorporated some error functions that we were using, because we were basically doing a script log of every action that a script took, so we could see but we were logging everything, just not just the errors. So that's very ingrained in that, so I have to peel that out before I get the file. But I will do my best to get a demo file out so that you can actually look at them in action and feel what happens when you're using them. Okay. Any other questions? John?
Can you talk about what some of the magic that's happening in the script parameter?
So the magic, if you talk to Clay, by the way. Clay doesn't like magic. So magic is where it sets variables on its own. So there's two versions of what happens, right? Like, you want to be able to specify the name of the variable and then have that variable set when the function runs. There's a large segment of programming developers that don't like that. They don't want side effects, which I get for the most part, but at the same time, I also don't want to spend all my time debugging, like that looping for each code. It's just a pain. So finding that balance between being usable and readable and making sure you know what's happening. It's, again, natural. That's what you want. Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
You found an expressive way to have like a single pass-through loop that is like a try-catch in your script?
Yes. So at City Tech, where I work, we probably have more error trapping lines than we have actual code doing things, because of that. So we use a single pass loop. I'm trying to think if I have a place I can show you easily. I don't think I do. I don't think I'll be able to connect to it from here. But I'll try to include that in a demo file, and I'll try to post that after Engage. But the idea basically comes down to you do the single pass loop and you do the exit loop if, and we have the error functions. So Dan Smith has a set of error functions, a suite of them, that he uses that are really easy to use for error trapping. You're just basically doing an error check after each step to make sure you are where you are, it's set the thing, you're on the right layout, whatever. Because sometimes triggers get in the way, and we end up either in the wrong mode or on the wrong layout, or it didn't change layouts, things like that. And then it basically logs the error in a variable and then sends back a true and it exits the loop. It's really, really helpful. And it's such a linear way to program. So the script, it always gets to the bottom. And there's only one place you have to handle the error code. So whatever you do with the function or the variable after that, whether you log it or do whatever, you can do it there. He has a separate logger too, by the way. If you go look at his repos, it's on GitHub. It's really helpful, and again, I'll try to include that in the demo file so that you can see how we're using it, because it's really powerful.
Do you have an opinion about comments?
I have a large, meandering opinion about comments. Yes. So in general, it comes back to what we talked about. Is it clear what's happening? If for some reason the code is complicated, a comment can make it simpler so that you don't have to necessarily read every step of the script. So the biggest thing that you can include in comments is the why you're doing something. Like the what, you can read the code for the most part. You get a section, like a lot of times we have section headers that tell us this is in general like what we're doing. So like I'll just skip past chunks of code because I don't need to look at it. But sometimes there's a reason why I set the variable this way and not that way. And you will not remember the reason why in a year, and you'll change it because it looks like this doesn't make any sense. Why didn't you just do it the easier way? Make sure you put the why in there. That's really important. The famous quote, write code like the next developer is a serial killer who knows your address. I'm not a serial killer, despite what everybody says. Any other questions?
Is the show object when? Is that just a not?
Yep.
Whatever you're doing?
Yeah, and the only reason it exists, there's been just so many times I've been in some twisty logic that my brain, I think I'm almost ashamed to say this, but I actually had to open up an Excel spreadsheet and make myself a little chart to figure out what the not and the or and all that and all that stuff was. Yeah, but it's just simple. Just write it to show what you want to show. Most of the time, that's easier. Not always, but again, when you read it, do you instantly know what it does? That's your answer. That's the right move. Okay. Anyone else? If you want opinions about the semicolon, we can talk about that when we're not recording. So you know, Beverly and Wim do it wrong. In all of his lifetime achievements, he hasn't achieved getting it in the right spot, so that's fine. But I love Wim. He's a good guy. I like Bev, too. She's nice. She heckles me constantly about it, by the way. We have differing opinions, as you can tell. But again, I also the older I get, the more it's like, as long as I know what the code is doing, I don't care. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I mean, sometimes it goes a little bit too far and I get a little itchy. But overall, as long as the code does what it's supposed to do and I know what it's doing without having to dig into every single subscript and every single custom function, then I just move on my way and it's fine. Which makes it easier and you're much a happier person.